And we'll just do a quick round of table introductions. We're just going to do this once. You guys come in again, we won't do the show, but for the sake of opening introductions, Matt Byron, chair of the committee. I represent Addison 3, Addison, Virgins, Waltham, Panton, Harrisburg, and about a third in New Haven.
Vice Chair Lisa Hango, Franklin 5, which is Richford, Berkshire, Franklin, and Highgate, on the northwestern border with Canada.
I'm Representative Sandy Pincinel from Dorset, and I represent Danby, Mount Tabor, Dorset, Landgrove, and Peru.
Regular committee guy, Michael Morgan, Grand Isle, Chittenden, represent Albert, Isle Lamont, North Hero, Grand Isle, South Hero, and as Charlie knows, western corner of Milton.
B.L. Coffin, Winter 2, so Cavendish, Weathersfield, Baltimore.
Mary Catherine Stone, Burlington.
Jay Cooper, Brookfield, Michigan, North Granville, Roxbury.
Hi, I'm Shay Waters Evans from Charlotte and Heinsberg.
And we have a couple of absences today. Representative Kate Nugent, South Burlington, is not with us today, as well as Representative Lucy Boyden of Cambridge. And he might have left for the day, Representative Bob Hooper of Burlington.
Yeah, he took his computer, so it's a good chance.
Yeah, he whispered something in my ear that sounded final for this departure, but it was very unclear. So
That's fun.
So
Thank you very much. Thanks for making time, and we will try not to keep you here too much longer than necessary. I'm Charlie Baker. I'm the Executive Director of the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission.
And I am Adam Leggi. I am Executive Director of the Addison County Regional Planning Commission. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, and we're really here on behalf of our state association. So we're, this is all the RPCs contributed to this. So hopefully this is helpful. We're really just kind of giving you an overview because we are touch a lot of parts of state government. So hopefully this is helpful. We'll do the introduction, talk about accountability, kind of who we work for, how that works, the funding, role in state policy, give you a little briefing on where the status of the last year's Housing Act 250 bill, how the implementation is going so far, and then talk about other program areas that we're involved with. So, so this is just a little intro. We really, provide that supplemental staff support and technical assistance to towns and the state, and particularly for towns that don't have staffing capacity, we provide that extra kind of staffing capacity. And really, we newsflash to government ops. We don't have county government really. A little bit. You guys probably know better than I do.
study going on or something like that?
Yeah, right. I heard something about that. And so we're in the absence of county government, we're the layer of government that the legislature created back in the 60s, where municipalities can jointly sit around our table, or we provide services to our towns and whatever other issues of interest, we kind of provide a forum for them to discuss. And we are political subdivisions of the state and do provide broad services on that. And yes, Mr. Chair, we are interested in that county and regional governance. And I know our peer, Chris Campany, has been participating actively in that work. And we were in Senate Gov Ops yesterday, sorry, a little tangent here. And it seemed like they were interested in continuing that work. So yeah, any way we can help support that or provide information or whatever else would be helpful to that effort.
We will definitely, Senator Callamore and I will definitely be reaching out to you folks. We understand that the roles are, it's in statutes that the chairs of the GovOps committees are participants in it. So we recognize that that defined role exists, and it is one of the agenda items for our meeting on Tuesday. So we will reach out once we wrap our heads around a few things.
Understood. Thank you for picking that up. Here's just a graphic that gives you a sense of the breadth of issues that we work on with either state agencies and our towns: transportation planning, land use planning, housing, brownfields, water quality, hazard mitigation, emergency preparedness, economic development, and energy are probably the major areas that we work on. Here's the map of the RPCs looks like. There are 11 of us. We have roughly 135 staff, plus or minus on any given day. And so, we're now at a scale where we're kind of like the size of a state, department of other different agencies. So I don't know if that's a helpful construct to think about. And I'm not taking any credit or blame for 282 municipalities here. I got this somewhere off the, Google. Google says we have 237 towns, 10 cities, 35 villages, and gores and a few unincorporated places too. And just a little note, last year we helped 113 towns with grant writing. And where they don't have the staff to do that, we try to take that kind of thing on for them. Any questions on the problem? Okay. Governance. We really are creatures of our municipalities. The towns appoint our board members. That's who we work for. Our boards, like other boards of organizations, do the policy work. They approve budgets, our regional plans, program priorities. We all have executive committees and as an executive director, that's who we're technically report to. They have oversight over the executive directors. And then each RPC also has a variety of committees that work on topical areas. And ours also are, the members of those committees are members of our municipalities. So we're another, so if they're focused on transportation, each town appoints a person to the Transportation Advisory Committee as an example. Okay. Funding. So we are not county government. We have no general tax revenue. All revenue comes from state or federal grants.
Municipal dues.
Yeah, a little bit of dues. Sometimes we might get some private foundation money or something like that. The dues, the last time we kind of compiled all that is about 5 to 7% of our budgets. So just to give you a sense of scale in terms of how much the municipality is paying. And that's kind of the most flexible money we get that we use to help match other state and federal grant programs. And we really, I don't know if this term translates, but we kind of work as a almost public sector consulting agency. Like everything we do is within an agreement with a different state agency or town. There are deliverables and timelines and tasks that we're doing for them. And and literally we work kind of like a consulting agency internally. We're billing every single hour to some project or another in order for us to get paid and pay our staff to do the work. And then this graphic here is just to, I'll read out all the acronyms just because this was kind of a mean thing to do to you.
No, that's fine. Yeah, run through the acronyms, then bust the acronyms. Yeah.
This is a test. This committee will probably do better than other committees. Agency Commerce and Community Development, that's the regional planning grant. VTrans, the Agency Natural Resources, Vermont Emergency Management, Agency of Administration, Buildings General Services, Department of Public Service, Vermont Department of Health, U.S. Department of Agriculture, particularly the Rural Development Program, the Economic Development Administration, which is, I probably should say U.S. in front of it, U.S. EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, U.S. DOT, the Northern Borders Regional Commission we just called out just because, for the last 10 years or so, they've been doing quite a bit of granting, and then town dues. And you can kind of see like we're in the middle trying to bring those funds to bear to help our municipalities.
You didn't mention the audits. Every one of us goes through an audit, basically every year. So we hold ourselves accountable. We hold ourselves accountable to our board members and our treasurers in other ways as well. Generally there's, for example, my treasurer signs checks, my president signs checks, I don't sign checks. But we've got a lot of good administrative procedures in place because we do federal granting. We are very familiar with basically requirements for some of those federal grants. And often administer them for our towns as well as for ourselves.
Or for state agencies too.
Or for state agencies. Charlie showed you the map earlier of basically us providing coverage to the entire state with a decent workforce. We've been doing a lot of contracting lately with different state agencies so that they sign one contract with one RPC as opposed to 250 towns. That RPC provides subcontracts to each of the other RPCs. and then to the towns, and it's a lot easier for a lot of the state agencies to administer. And get a statewide reach at a very local level.
Yeah, and one of the ways, you know, whenever the legislature asks a state agency to do something to work with towns, typically the state agency is saying, well, it's actually easier if we contract with the RPCs to get out to all the towns. So that typically happens. State policy and kind of, yeah, as you might imagine, because we're seeing this variety of issues and between the town and the state, we are, you know, often asked to serve on state councils or boards to just, you know, provide some perspective of what we're seeing. So that's what this one is. And then we get into the Housing Act 250 bill. So a couple updates, you know, the interim exemptions went into place pretty immediately last summer. If you're looking at the digital version, I think those links up there work if you actually want to check out the map and where the exemptions are.
Hold on.
We had one requirement of that law was that we produce a document to get more detailed on how the RPCs will do consistent land use mapping across the state. We have produced that document in December was the deadline. And we've also been working with what was the NRB, now the Land Use Review Board staff and the Department of Housing and Community Development on trainings around the state. So we've done a handful of those. And so that's underway. Starting to meet with towns to work on this mapping and the plans. We are on schedule for all 11 regional plans to be updated. That law had a deadline for us at the end of 2026. And you can see the last one down below there. You see all of our acronyms. Apologies for that. Let me know if anybody wants to know what one of those is. But Two Rivers is the last one, and they're targeting fall of 26. So we are on track in terms of that schedule to get our part of the work done.
And they're later because they are just now adopting their regional plan. So they are all set to go, have their regional plan ready to adopt, and then they're going to go back and do it again. So that's why they're a little behind.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely happened for a few RPCs. We're stuck in that situation, but we're all working through it. We also help towns with planning, zoning, mapping issues. Last year, we helped 188 towns with planning and bylaw assistance. 180 towns got mapping services. And down at the bottom here, you can see kind of the aggregated results of where the status of the whole state really. So we have 240 municipalities have plans, 207 have zoning with flood bylaws. Probably should add that because there's only 37 that don't have zoning but have flood bylaws. So they only have flood bylaws, didn't want to get into the zoning game. And then we have another 17 that have no bylaws whatsoever. So no flood.
It's like, I mean, with the 17 that have like no bylaws, period, what's like a ballpark population size of those? They must be smaller.
And this is, I say this with no emotion touch, but yeah, they're the smallest towns.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, no, and that was just me making sure I'm kind of just reading between the lines and assessing as I should. Yeah.
And while we're the Regional Planning Commission, this slide kind of goes to our municipal work. You know, in Addison County, there's one planner for the town of Middlebury, and every other town is operated by a volunteer planning commission. So in essence, we do a lot of municipal work, and that's true all over the state, in addition to the regional work that we do.
And then over the last year or two, the legislature has invested in us to do some more direct housing work. It was called the Housing Navigator program. I think we got funding for like 18 months, something like that, to do that work. Some of the work was going into zoning updates, you know, to increase density and things, but other things were going into just more programmatic, like helping give property owners guidance on accessory dwelling units. Do you want to talk about your project then?
Sure. So we made up a guide. It was for Addison County, but it was a kind of a hands-on guide. This is how you create an accessory dwelling unit, and it went through everything from dealing with contractors to leases to funding. We actually supplemented it by having a retired contractor do sketches for people. So basically to scale sketches. So the hardest part we found was for people to visualize, well, how am I gonna get this ADU in my garage, above my garage, or wherever it might be in the back room. So we actually funded that piece for about $750 per, but it really helped a lot of people move forward. They could then go out, get a bid from a contractor on it, know what they were gonna pay, and know whether or not it was basically appropriate for them or not, whether or not it was something that was gonna work for them. So, and that's been duplicated over a lot of counties have basically duplicated that. The reason it was Addison County was it's you go to this zoning administrator first, or you go to the Rutland office for wastewater or things of that nature. So if you just change those, all the other content was interchangeable.
Mhm.
So it's just like an easy template to overlay into the other RPCs. Yeah.
I hope so.
Okay, cool.
I think so.
We'll run with that for now.
That's right, that is. This slide is the only kind of forward-looking policy slide. So we are not coming here with any particular asks, but we just know the legislature is going to be dealing more with how to increase more housing production. And so this is not an official VAPTA position or anything, but these are just some ideas that have come out, some conversations with some directors. And this is nothing genius here. But as we're talking to towns about how they might grow, we're definitely going to get more infrastructure requests, water and sewer funding or financing mechanisms. I'm hoping to see something out of the administration next week on this. So that's number one. Number two, the risk of permit appeals is still out there. And particularly where we're trying to encourage growth and make it easier or remove regulatory barriers, kind of reducing that appeal risk is another important area. There was a little movement on that last year. But, when all the pressure is now on the town permit, we're going to have to do more to make that easier. This Vermont is a very, very friendly to the neighbor in terms of making it easy to appeal.
Yeah.
And so hopefully we can change that dynamic a little bit. And then the third level is really looking at other permits beyond Act 250, particularly within DEC. That might be wetlands, stormwater in particular, and the State Historic Preservation Office. And kind of making sure that how they're implementing their permit requirements is supportive of growth in these areas. So just something to look at. That might be, so any one of these could be study work, or it could be something that gets into legislation this year. We don't know. We're not-
Just as an educational moment for the committee, could you speak to the tier 1A, the tier 1B, and what you're talking about the difference?
Oh my.
And if you could
Or are we
relate
going
it-
too hard too early?
And if you could relate it to the map that you have linked here, because right now you have a map that's linked that gives the exemption areas. It might help us all visually to see what your ask would do to that map. Because right now there are very few areas of the state where this kind of development is allowed.
Actually, I'm gonna keep it up here because as soon as we get into the map, we'll go down some rabbit holes.
You're comfortable with?
Yeah. So just to give you some sense, prior to the legislation last year, there were some partial exemptions from Act 250 in like neighborhood development areas and some of those 5 designations we used to have, right? With the downtowns and new town centers and village centers. That land area was about 0.3% of the state was in those designation areas. Not all of them had exemption benefits, but they had some sort of tax credit benefits at least. And some of them had the activity benefits. The interim exemption map, I think is a little, I think like 2.1% of the state. So we kind of had a significant increase in the land area covered from what was, but it's still only 2% of the state. And so that is roughly the area, Representative Hago, I know we had a lot of conversations about these tiers last year, particularly with the rural caucus. That is kind of the tier 1 area so far. right? And then the mapping that we're doing as part of our regional plans, and the early feedback, we've been kind of checking in with each other, like, how is this mapping going for I'll call it just the tier one areas? Because I was like, are they smaller than the interim maps or larger? At least some of the feedback we're getting so far is that they're larger. So I think that's a good thing for the state in terms of housing production areas. And then for those of you that weren't here or managed to avoid that conversation last year, there are two other tiers in that Act 181. Tier 3 is intended to be some level of potentially increased Act 250 jurisdiction, but areas of the state has a larger interest in conserving potentially. And I'm saying this, everything you hear me say has a question mark on the end, because that is going to be subject to rulemaking with the Land Use Review Board. I don't think they're supposed to come back with rulemaking until sometime in 2026 at the earliest.
I think I had 27 in my head, but
Yeah.
somewhere in there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some conversation about, timing of that. And, that was this, sorry, if I could be honest about the political conversation last year, that was a difficult part of the conversation because early on, the definition that was included in the bill of tier 3, you may remember this, the governor had a press conference around this, but it covered like 86% of the state. And that, didn't seem to be the intent of the House Environment Committee. And so there's going to have to be a lot more work done there.
Remember heat map.
Yeah.
Yes.
Heat map.
That's the one with the red map, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know, there's also another state law that got put into effect about the, 30% by 2030 and 50% by 2050. That, I think those reports are supposed to come out at the end of this year. So somehow that is going to result in some sort of tier 3 that the Land Use Review Board put some rulemaking on or you change. But that's the process. And anything in between, so what's not a growth area, what's not trying to be conserved is tier 2, which was largely intended to be Act 250 largely as it is, with the exception of the road rule. A new road rule got put in to try to, I think, reduce the amount of like long driveways into forest land. So, sorry,
It
that's
had like length and number of units
Yeah.
attached to it as like a.
Some of 2,000
or something
Yeah.
right away.
either a single driveway or road of 800 feet or a combination of 2,000 feet. So anyway, I'm not trying to.
Yeah, we're getting weedy.
Not trying to get too deep into that. Was that helpful? Was that what you were looking for? Was it a pain or was that?
The only thing I wanted to know was, tier 1B,
Yes.
if, you have, I guess if you have legislation and how, or wording in other committees that is going to affect this tier 1B, because I don't think you just talked about tier 1B. We talked about tier 1, 2, and 3, but the 1B.
There's the one that- the one-
Sorry.
Right.
When I say tier 1, I kind of did that to blur because you got to be in tier 1B if you want to get to 1A. But it's like it's the same geography. It's just like you're meeting higher criteria. So like I said, it's confusing. So if you heard me say tier 1, that meant 1B.
Okay, so the map, the exemption, interim exemption map that you have linked there, does that include the potential changes to tier 1B, or would that expand those little pink centers of development?
So I will try and answer that question. And I'll try from the way that we, the Addison County Regional Planning Commission, are looking at tier 1B. So, within the constraints of basically the rules that we have to map, we're looking to make tier 1B. And I think most towns, cities in Addison County will be tier 1B. It may be that the city of Regents, the town of Middlebury, go through the extra process to get up to 1A, but I think basically every other village, every other town in Addison County will be a tier 1B. Some of them don't have any of those exemptions right now because they didn't have a designated or they didn't have a village center.
Right.
So those currently don't exist. They definitely will expand. Most of our towns, and some of ours are very small, will have a village center, and we will basically try and raise that village center to tier 1B. I like to think of tier 1B when I'm thinking about it as what everyone would picture when they're thinking of the village of Moncton, New Haven, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe plus a little bit more where there are good soils for housing. So in general, we've only done like 3 or 4 of our towns as examples so far, but in general, they have been larger. The 1B areas have been larger than the exemptions that are currently allowed under Act 250. They are pretty similar. The shape may change of the blob because that's kind of a circle and it doesn't necessarily take in topography or other things or where the village actually is, right? Where the housing development on the outside of that village might be. So that's what we're trying to get to.
And the other dynamic, just because it was in house environment this morning, is also trying to make sure that the growth areas are flood safe. And so that's the other part of the dynamic that we're wrestling with as we are doing this mapping of the towns.
Thank you.
And we can come back and do a deeper dive at some later point if you like. Economic development. We also work with our regional development corporations. 126 towns received economic development assistance last fiscal year. And kind of the partnership with the regional development corporations, like they really have relationships with the individual employers, the businesses, and try to help them thrive and grow. And we're really doing the front end work of making sure the community is ready, like kind of development ready for them. You know, they have the whatever rule or zoning that they need in place or infrastructure so that the business can grow. So it's kind of a partnership at that level. Here's an example of NVDA is both an RPC and an RDC. But just to kind of give you a sense of what RPCs do, like they worked with the town of Albany on a town plan. They got a designated village center. They then, because it's a village center, they can get tax credits. They got some EPA money to do brownfields assessment and then cleanup, and they turned blighted former gas station into the new Albany General Store. So that's the one thing that's missing here is how long that took, but that took years of like kind of consistent RPC engagement to get to that kind of end product. Brownfields, get a little bit deeper there. We did brownfields projects in 55 towns last year. But here's another example from the Northeast Kingdom where they did a mass timber housing project, but really only because we had brownfields money where we could assess and clean up that site. There was an industrial site and now it's a housing site. Transportation planning. This is a program through VTrans. 211 towns got technical assistance in transportation last year. Sometimes those are just helping the town track what they have, culvert inventories, traffic counts. We also help them comply with the Municipal Roads General Permit, which is a permit under DEC as part of the Clean Water Act in Vermont. And help them do road erosion inventories to reduce that runoff. There's an example down here of Northwest RPC working on with the Rail Council on the Missisquoi and Lamoille Valley Rail Trails. And you can kind of see it again cross-cutting, even though it's a rail trail, they're doing an interactive map to help really with economic development and tourism and promote, and help people that use those trails get to those businesses and that kind of thing. Clean water. I mentioned a little bit the Municipal Roads General Permit. 204 towns got assistance last year with water quality work. You want to talk about your project?
Sure, I can talk about that one. So as the clean water service provider for, we are the Otter Creek Basin, which is actually both Rutland and Addison County. Rutland RPC handles basically the lake zone or the direct drainage into the lake. So again, part of Addison and Rutland County. we are responsible for, I guess, the last piece of the bucket for clean water improvements in the state of Vermont. So the strategy the state adopted was basically they were going to go to all sectors to try and improve water quality. So agriculture is regulated through the required agricultural practices. Municipal roads general permit that Charlie talked about regulates municipal roads. This 3-acre stormwater permit basically regulates stormwater. The Clean Water Service Provider is actually a volunteer program, and we get everything else. So basically we have money to, and that's largely riverine flooding or erosion. It's floodplains and restoring rivers to their floodplains. It's plantings along. This in particular was a forest road project. So basically helping the town of Bristol on Seth Hill restore some forest roads that had probably been there for a long, long time. They weren't subject to the let's see, AMPs and BMPs, best management practices for forestry, because there were legacy roads that were eroding. So we went in there with them and we funded basically the fixes to those roads that you see in that picture there. So as Clean Water Service Providers, we're looking for, volunteer projects to help us clean. And it can be stormwater, it can be like this, or it can be riverine things. But it's kind of the last piece of the puzzle to the Clean Water Act.
It's sort of just like a road like this pictured here. Is that like to access, that recreational or
Both. It's
residential up that way too? Or?
No, it's not
I
residential.
was gonna say.
It's recreational and it's a forest road. So eventually they will log it again, right? A lot of forests are big gardens that you harvest once every 25 years.
Mhm.
You should.
Yeah.
Energy planning. So we now have 228 towns that have enhanced energy plans across the state, which is an effort that started, I don't know how many years ago, 6-8 years ago, maybe. And so that's been working. We work with the Department of Public Service, reviews those plans, reviews our regional plan. And then we just highlighted a program that we worked on over the last year or two with Buildings and General Services, the Municipal Energy Resilience Program. I can't remember if this may have come through this committee at any point. It was a couple of years ago.
We did that was before my tenure, but
Okay.
we'll run with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like something that would have
I'll
come.
give you guys credit.
Yeah.
And, but it was a big program. I think the state put like 40 something million into ARPA money into this to help towns really examine the town buildings and try to make sure they were as energy efficient and therefore as, least expensive to maintain over time or operate. So we did, worked with building mini grants to 176 towns. The 600 municipal buildings got free energy assessments, and 126 towns got almost 36 million to actually do construction work and update those buildings. And there was some targeting in this, so it got targeted towards the lowest capacity towns. I'm saying this from Chittenden County. Very little of this money is going to Chittenden County. And emergency planning and response, I think this is kind of the last real substance. We also have an annual grant from VEM that's not big, but it does help us be engaged in this work a little bit. We help make sure that towns have local emergency management plans. We also provide extra staff support for the State Emergency Operations Center. And this really kind of grew out of Irene. They got overwhelmed. They called us for help. We were, like all hands on deck, right? We all stepped up to help. And then we institutionalized that. So we have an agreement with VEM where when they open the State Emergency Operations Center, disasters coming, they may call on us to, fill some of the 24/7 shifts, right? And they don't have enough capacity in their own staff. So we supplement that capacity for them and with them. And then the last slide is really just, kind of noting partnership efforts. I mentioned the regional development corporations. We've been creating economic development districts around the state with them. We also, almost all of us provided some support early on for communications union districts. Some of us are still continuing that support. Some of those CUDs have, left the nest and hired their own executive directors, and they have, they're off and running now. Others we're still supporting. So we've talked about clean water service provider work, other things. And I think I may have mentioned this, but we're one of the few entities that kind of stay engaged with the town from the conceptual planning stage, and we can work with them and help support them and really even manage projects through to the end. And I think that's some of the value we've been bringing to the state. One other program that we were just highlighting here that got, I think this came out of the Budget Adjustment Act last year, the Municipal Technical Assistance Program. I think it was like 3 million. And so we worked with the Agency of Administration. They subbed some money to the Two Rivers, and this was followed that model that Adam mentioned before. Two Rivers then subbed money to the rest of us to help those lowest capacity towns. This one also had very little money that went to Chittenden County. Only St. George got a little bit of help.
As debatably your smallest.
That is our lowest capacity town. But I think a lot of good things have come out of this work in terms of identifying needs from those, the municipalities that need the most help. Not all the projects were able to get funded to implement, so there's a pretty good list out there of things to fund also in those towns.
Right, so hopefully Agency of Administration will be bringing those back this year, because this program was really oversubscribed, but it's helping towns do a lot of interesting projects. We only got one in Addison County, and that's the town of Salisbury, and they are using it to basically redo their town hall. So they're using it for the wastewater systems, the architecture, basically all the planning that they needed to basically rework that community center. So it's a nice program.
That was it.
All right.
Conversation, take any more questions?
Any questions from
You got
anyone here? Everybody got a case of the Fridays? No.
There's a lot to take in that I'm still gonna have to read more this weekend.
Oh, it is so much.
I know, this tier 1, tier 2.
Yeah.
Just don't even ignore that. We'll get
I'm
to
sorry.
that.
I
She did a thing that we've been
Yeah, I
talking about for
apologize.
years. I was like, here we
Yeah.
go. It was an important contact point while we had him here.
Yes, so that is
Don't
not
Feel
really
guilty about
for you to
wondering
digest.
what the hell we're talking
We're
about.
certainly happy to come back and, been talking to Pete Gill also, if you want to have, land use review board staff and us or, and the Department of Housing Community Development who does the designation program, come and talk about how all that's, happy to do that.
We may need to leave that to the Environment Committee as well.
The other option.
There's certain governmental structures that exist within this committee's jurisdiction
Mhm.
that offer us a path to the conversation.
I'm new,
Right.
but I think we should have an acronym test once a week, see how well we're retaining all these.
We can set up that workshop if you want.
Yeah.
Skill building.
Trans, I
Yeah.
figured that one out right off the bat. I know that.
It is a lot, it is a lot. No, I mean, I thank you so much. I really appreciate you both being here in person. This was, I think, like an appropriate level of detail to A, overwhelm the new ones, and B, sort of refresh those of us who've been here for a while. Yeah. So, I mean, we're gonna be having a lot of conversations in and around a bunch of this stuff. I'm glad you were here to introduce yourselves to new committee members and whatnot. If you don't have anything else for us, we'll call it. But this is just teeing up a big slug of work over the next 2 years, so we'll be seeing each other.
Yeah, please do not hesitate to call. We're happy to help. We are in that weird position between town and states, and we kind of think of ourselves as the flexible fabric that helps, hopefully, and also helps things work more smoothly.
Yes, and I think the first contact point for me, at least anyway, is gonna be once I figure things out with Senator Callamore about jumping back into this county government thing, because I know that is not just a big priority for myself as a project, but the speaker has already been asking me when the hell we're going.
Oh, nice. Can I offer one thought on that?
Please.
And I don't know if this may be too much of a twist, the assignment that committee was tasked with, but to really, have a way to look at all the functions that we're expecting of government to perform. That's a long list. But are they happening at the right level?
Hmm.
Like, you know, and just kind of ask ourselves that question and, you know, and see if things could be, you know, is that really a state function, not a town function, or vice versa? You know, so anyway, that's what I hope that work gets at.
Yes.
And yeah, if we need to evolve or change, I think, you know, we're, as an organization, we're kind of here to support the state and our towns. So if we need to evolve, we're open to that, I think.
No, and I just think like philosophically, you know, the approach over the last couple of years and to continue on, I know I can speak for a bunch of my colleagues is, you know, we're just updating and modernizing a bunch of things that haven't been looked at, poked at, and reconfigured in a while.
And the thing I just said hasn't been done since the sixties.
Wow. Very much case in point. Yeah.
Right.
You guys. All right. With that closes out the week for government operations.